What's going on with AI? Where are we going? Because this is getting crazy.
Emad Mostaque is a leading figure in the field of artificial intelligence.
With a background in mathematics and computer science from the University of Oxford, he combined his expertise in technology and finance to found Stability AI, where he spearheaded the creation of open and accessible tools.
A visionary for democratizing access to generative AI through Stable Diffusion.
In a 2023 Forbes statement, he said Stable Diffusion sparked the launch of ChatGPT, underscoring the impact and relevance of his contribution.
I think this is the real takeoff period this year. Soon swarms of agents that are about to emerge. And we've never seen anything like this before. The transition is going to be messy, and again, it hits different economies differently because of the way they're made up. So a lot of jobs are going that will never come back, because every company in the world at the same time will say, do I need to hire a graduate?
Are we ready for that amount of change in such a short time?
A couple of years ago, I got a lot of stick for saying there are no more programmers in 5 years. People that embrace this technology will massively outpace the people that don't. It's such a force multiplier. So you'll have agents for all of those that your team will have, that such they don't need to grow massively. Teams, we call it AI Atlantis, a brand new continent with 1 trillion agents that you can hire for almost nothing to do whatever you'd like. An agent can spin up other agents to go and do arbitrarily long, complex things, with now the ability to call and talk to your agent, and literally you'll be able to Zoom call it and see an entity by next year. So I think it's a massive inequality reducer. If we create universal AI, you should do 1 hour for every member of your family of 5 coding. Doesn't matter how old or young you are, because then it will change your mentality, right? We need to have that as standard in our schools. Dominant narrative is one of giant data centers using gigawatts of electricity, nuclear power, but you can do a lot with a little. And that's where I saw the power of this technology. So our latest medical model, AI Medical. So basically with a solar panel plus a normal cell phone, you can have a Harvard educated doctor level intelligence anywhere in the world without internet.
How much our world is going to change in the next 2-5 years?
Massively, because
Este podcast ha sido grabado íntegramente en inglés debido al idioma del invitado. Si quieres ver una versión en español, tienes el link en la descripción con el podcast traducido con inteligencia artificial a español. Today we have a very special podcast. We are in London because we are going to talk with Emad Mostaque, one of the architects of the age of the AI. He was the CEO of Stability for years, and he was the one that brought the Stable Diffusion, the image model, to the hands of hundreds of millions of people. For a long time, he was one of the most influential people in the world of AI, and today he's going to tell us what he thinks of AI now and what is going to happen with the future of humanity. So let's get into it. Emad, thanks for coming today here. It's absolutely an honor. I've been following you for a long time. Actually, we're one of the first persons I follow when I started into AI. What's going on with AI? Where are we going? Because this is getting crazy.
oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And, a nice, easy question to start. I think this is the real takeoff period this year, whereby AI has gone from what they called a sarcastic parrot, like a very smart person that you just bounced ideas off, to now you have these agents that can do all these things, to soon swarms of agents that are about to emerge. And the way that we're going to interact with AI that's more capable than us in many aspects is going to be the way that we just deal with anyone. We'll be able to Zoom it, call it, WhatsApp it, etc. I think this year is the year of takeoff in terms of capabilities and accessibility.
So everything we've seen until now, it was kind of like tile game, and now we're getting serious?
Yeah, again, it's like a year ago, you would talk to an AI, but it'd be like a prompt, and it came back. It had no memory. It had no capability to do longer tasks. Now it can do tasks of up to 7 hours. On the Gaia benchmark by Meta, which is an agent benchmark of how it can do tasks like building websites, writing presentations, things like that, a year ago, we're at 15 to 20% on that benchmark. Now we're at our latest AI agent model is 76%, and human level is 92%. So I think we'll get there next year where you don't know it's an AI on the other side of the screen.
So this acceleration that we've been feeling about AI, where we've been going from the first models, then the bigger models, then even bigger models, then multimodal models, then reasoning models, all this acceleration that we went through, it's just the start of the curve. Is it coming? Is it more coming? We've seen this year what's been released from O3, from ChatGPT, etc. It's been like amounts better than what we had before. But is it going to be like that on the next years?
The models are now good enough, fast enough, and cheap enough. But the key thing is another axis of agents. And the final axis is multiple agents, which is like hiring a team and then getting them to work together. And that's the next steps that we're seeing. So the example of this would be that when you're at school, you learn your history, right? Who was the president at this time and that. And you have a history test and you just have to write down the answers quickly. That's how AI was. But then you move up into essays that learn from history. And then from that, you apply it yourself.
Right.
So we just did the first part of rote learning. Now it's the principles on an individual basis. And the next will be applying those principles as teams, which lets you do the really complicated stuff.
So what the world looks like in that situation where AI is doing all of that, like how much our world is going to change in the next 2-5 years?
Massively, because whenever you want to do something, the key constriction is usually your messaging and the talent and people that you can bring to bear. You know, like as you do your podcast, you'd love it if someone could translate it into multiple languages or edit it right, you know, dynamically or adjust it, you know, fill in the gaps. You'll have agents for all of those that your team will have that such they don't need to grow massively for it to reach even more people. And everyone will have access to these massive teams. We call it AI Atlantis, a brand new continent with 1 trillion agents that you can hire for almost nothing to do whatever you'd like. And we've never seen that before, where you could get talent so quickly.
But we've seen like the situation that happened in other technical revolutions, like the Industrial Revolution here in the UK, for example, where when machines came to do the job of people, that was not so nice for that people for a while. And then later it gave like everyone benefits. But in the short term, there was many people like waivers that they were losing their jobs. So do you think like this is going to affect the labor market as well?
Yeah, I mean, labor share of GDP kind of solo law is generally quite static and new jobs replace old jobs. You know, like you used to have people pushing the button on elevators and things like that. One of the challenges here that we don't know is just that it's everywhere all at once, this technology. Like the average IQ of the top models last year was 90. This year it's 110. And every single one got upgraded at the same time. And it became accessible to 1 billion people at the same time. Whereas with the Industrial Revolution, you had to build factories and things like that. With the Internet Revolution, you had to have smartphones disseminated and people move from dial-up, etc. Now it runs on existing things and it's accessible. We've never seen anything like that before. So the key worry here is, what do graduates do for jobs when people hire these massively learning, excellent workers instead? What happens when you're competing against other people using this technology? You're going to have to uplift. So I think it's going to be very positive long term, but it could be a messy few years, especially on the employment side and as well the meaning side. Because if your worth and your meaning has been tied to being intelligent, sophisticated, specialized in a certain area, and then all of a sudden an agent or swarm of agents can do it better, what do you do now? How do you repurpose how you orient your life?
Yeah, that's what Hinton said, no? That maybe UBI or other solutions. I think you're against UBI, right?
Yeah, I mean, governments are terrible at allocating resources.
we talk about that later. I think it would be good that we go through your opinion on that.
Yeah.
But Hinton said that UBI may put bread on your table, but it would not give you purpose. So then basically we have more like a cultural crisis more than an economic crisis.
Yeah, especially within the West, where, you know, we're very privileged, right? Whereas if you look at the global South, it's a massive opportunity. Because if you did a remote work, for example, you're challenged because of your communication skills, because you're not a native English. It's not a problem anymore. All your communication is in perfect English or whatever language now. You're challenged because you didn't have access to expert knowledge. Not a problem anymore. You can code now as well as anyone. You can do medical diagnoses as well as anyone. It closes the knowledge gap and it gives opportunity. But the key thing is having the mentality of agency and being agentic enough to take advantage of that. And that's a big shift in versus the way that we're classically taught to be small cogs in large organizations.
Right. So for people who's not really seeing that future, because it's hard to imagine that in the next 2, 5, 10 years, things are going to be completely different, because we are used that they've been probably almost the same for the last decades. And since the Industrial Revolution or the Second Industrial Revolution, things haven't changed much. For people who cannot see it, but they are actually using ChatGPT today, they're using it on their work and they see that they can do more productive work with it. How is it going to happen in a timeline? Do you have an idea of like, how is it going to come down the road?
Yeah, it's about interfaces, right? So you use ChatGPT, and again, it's just like having someone very smart next to you who can just look over your shoulder and answer something. Then they forget, they walk away, then you call them back in. The use of agents is something very different. And deep research is probably one of the first examples of that. On ChatGPT and others, we created an open source version of that, where you tell it to write a report and it writes a report with citations. But it goes away and it thinks for a while. Now you'll see that in more and more areas, like go and make a movie or an advertising campaign, make a website, and it goes and does it, and then you give it feedback. And the key thing here is the interface design, whereby I think the way that most of us will use agents is the way that most of us scale our teams and work with our teams. You will onboard with your agent via a Zoom call. And we have the technology for that right now. And then you'll tell it what you want. Then it'll come back and show you some storyboards and ideas. And then you'll talk to it on Slack. Or again, you'll give it a call. It'll give you an update every so often. And there'll be dozens of these things going. So the way we work with this will be no different to the way that we work with our current teams, except for they'll learn from their mistakes. They'll work 24/7. And guess what? It'll cost a fraction of what a human costs, even in the poorest nations in the world. And that's before we get to robots, which, you know, it's the same thing.
It's the next level.
Yeah.
So basically what people will see is that more often they use, like if they had a team of people working for them, where they will delegate some tasks and send them to make work on it, or at the same time work with them on other tasks that are not so simple to be delegated. And do we have a space for that many workers? Because I understand, like in things like health, like you can use more doctors. I could go to the doctor for any stupid thing, and now I only go when it's something really important because I know there is queues. It's going to take a while because it's expensive or whatever. So I understand in certain places I can use more of the same service, so having more people or more agents working on it, it's positive. But in certain fields, we don't need more. I'm not going to buy more shoes because they are cheaper or more available.
Yeah, I mean, like certain industries are affected more than others, and there'll be new types of job. But an example is the call center worker. Mm-hmm. No one needs to get only call center workers anymore because the AI is strictly better than any call center worker ever. Like the best 5-star award-winning call center worker has been overtaken by AI. That's a whole industry that over the next few years will just disappear. Because why would you have your call center if you can just scale that up using a few chips? Whereas other things will be like, you have higher experience medical things where it moves from sick care to healthcare. You know, proactive stuff because suddenly everyone can have a personalized doctor. A better standard of education where every child can have a personalized tutor, or the nature of education and a teacher changes. Within an organizational business setting, you can solve more pain points because you can scale, again, the amount of intelligence there. But you kind of have to use it to understand it, just like, you know, a lot of people are resistant to using ChatGPT first. Now agents will be the next thing. And that's why these natural interfaces, I think, are very important, because ultimately it's about problem solving. That's why kind of my recommendation to everyone, every family, community, company should for 1 hour a week vibe code with Replit.
Okay.
Replit's the most integrated thing where you don't even need to touch the keyboard. You can just talk to it and it'll make apps. And I'm not saying build anything in particular. If you just use it, suddenly you'll see these agents going and doing stuff and putting together games and apps in front of you. And it changes the way that you think. You're like, wow, I could do that. And that changes the way that you work, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm someone who can scale up a team to go and solve things.
So pipe coding, for people to understand, is basically when we code with natural language, which basically you talk to the AI and the AI does the code part, where you just tell it what you want. This is a term that was kind of like set up by Karpathy, if I'm not wrong.
Andrew Karpathy, yeah.
And then from there, like it got like a massive pipe, like basically Lovable is the biggest ever growing app in Europe, and it's a pipe coding app. And we have the same with like Lovable, Bolt, Replit,
yes.
And there is like several, so everyone can try. Actually, I think Google added some in AI Studio now recently.
Yeah, they have Jules.
Exactly, and there's plenty of different options. And you recommend that anyone starts doing that?
I've seen 5-year-olds make computer games, and 65-year-olds make computer games. You know, like the whole thing is to change the way that you think by just doing that, and it changes your mind to an agentic type of mind, where you can leverage and use these technologies. And using protocols like MCP that Anthropic came up with, these agents can go out and get other agents that come and help them. So all of a sudden you can book travel, it can make phone calls, it can do all sorts of things. Right. And again, the future is humans plus lots of workers for them, these agents. Right. The jobs of the future, we're not sure yet, but right now we know we can have better experiences cheaper. And that causes, again, I think, an improvement in overall function, GDP, and others. But there are questions around entry-level employment. You know, what happens if we get some of these shocks hitting industries? Some industries may not exist, and new ones will emerge.
So you basically see a future like in a close range, like 5-10 years, where the GDP goes up, but the employment goes down.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. Like companies, like some people say, Emad, are you bearish on Indian outsourcing companies like Emphasis and others? I'm like, no, they'll just replace the Patels with GPUs, you know, and their margins will go super normal, but people will trust them to do those types of jobs. And I think a lot of the misnomer is that the focus on AI has been on AGI, this super genius chef. Whereas I think the most impactful things to our everyday lives are super cooks. I give the example of, there's Heston Blumenthal here in the UK, 3 Michelin star chef. You go to his restaurant, The Fat Duck, they have snail porridge. Like, it's okay, but it's not what I want to eat every day, you know? And I don't want brand new recipes. What I want is people to do my taxes, to make my presentations, to check my healthcare, to teach my kids, you know, to entertain me. And these AIs are very good at that. They make a mistake once, they won't make it again. They'll work around the clock. And again, on capabilities, we're seeing them exceed human capabilities in a narrow field. And even crazier, actually, we're seeing AIs by themselves outperform humans plus AI. So Google had this study, AIME, AI medical expert. Clinicians underperformed clinicians with Google, underperformed clinicians with AI, underperformed AI by itself.
We are basically slowing down progress, trying to involve ourselves in it.
You can't, if an AI is as capable as you in terms of being able to solve a problem, it will never get tired and it's faster than you. Like right now, humans can read about 10 tokens a second, 10 words a second, roughly. The best AI models can output at 2,000. And that's only going to go up. So again, there's this question of meaning when all of a sudden there's something more capable than you as a cook. That leaves aside creativity and chef and agency. And that's why, again, I think the focus on increasing individual agency, community agency, organizational agency, and getting into those habits via a weekly vibe coding thing, etc., is what's most important.
But this is huge because basically what we're saying is we're getting to a point where what's the sense on doing something if AI can do it better than me? So that basically leaves us in a point where right now it might be some things, like we said, some diagnosis. It may be some things like maybe making my taxes. It may be some things like customer service. When this is growing on different sectors every day, like photographers like me, we've been like replaced by your company, by the way, thank you. No, it's totally fine. We started using AI and it made our company better, but definitely it had a massive impact on the industry. Stock photography is gone. And all of this, it's growing every time and more companies. So the point is, when and what are we going to do when there is nothing else that we can do better than AI? What is going to be the purpose? Definitely it will not be doing a job. And then what society we get, because I can understand companies making lots of money, GDP is going up.
Yeah.
But beside you not having purpose, which I think is a secondary first world problem, what do you do? How do you get your money to be able to feed your kids when you don't have a job? Because right now the social pact is I go to work, I get money. With that money, I can buy food.
Yes.
That's basically what society has been for the last decades. So we're taking off that you don't need to go to work anymore. We got that covered. We're producing products and everything with AI. How am I going to make my money?
So I think this is one of these key questions because the link between labor and capital has always been very strong. You know, the human labor share of GDP has always been pretty constant because we weren't the most capable. We were always the most capable entities. And then we come together and we work, but as we scale our organizations, they become less efficient, you know? Where capital comes from now, people are looking at schemes like UBI. I'm very dubious because I don't think we can redistribute wealth very well. And again, we haven't done that classically. There's things like job guarantees, which could kind of fill in. There are people have suggested taxing the AIs.
Job guarantees, you mean like forbidding AI into certain areas so
no, like
humans have jobs?
It's like government guaranteed jobs. Mm-hmm. You know, like do expand the bureaucracy, but that feels like digging holes and filling them back in again, right? Mm-hmm. Some people have suggested taxing AIs.
Token tax.
But the cost of AI is dropping 10 to 100 times a year. So what are you even taxing as it heads towards free?
If you put a percentage on that, it's going to go to null.
So yeah, I think that we need to examine the very concept of money.
Wow.
And capital. Well, because again, like labor and capital, there's disconnect here. Instead, the focus needs to be human benefit. And how do we allocate resources using these trillion new agents that are out there? And that's why I set up the company to say, how does that look for AI first healthcare, government, finance, to allocate these things optimally? Because the future that we really want is the Star Trek future.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek is a future of abundance, where they go and they explore, and meaning comes through exploration.
And purpose. Yeah, you're doing something like for the sake of it, not for the money you get paid.
Exactly. It's like the classical Greek times. You know, you had your patronage system because some Greeks were lucky enough to be post-abundance. And what did they do? They read in the morning, they had a chat in the evening, and they kind of came up with brand new things. You know, greater appreciation of art, greater appreciation of other things. Do we have enough resources in the world to make sure that no one goes hungry? Yes. But we have a capital allocation problem. We have a resource allocation problem. With AI, can we do it better? I think the answer is yes. Because most of this is about, we can't trust third parties to allocate appropriately, but you can trust an AI if you build it right.
You could build it right. That's a very, very specific point, because the thing is people who's building that, and obviously there is people like you doing it in a different way, but the main companies, the big tech companies, they are not doing it right.
Yeah, Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, has an interesting post about this called the revenue evil curve, whereby you try to build things as infrastructure, but then you become exclusionary or rivalrous, and it becomes more evil once you start charging revenue to people. You either want to make sure that people have to pay to access it, or you compete with existing solutions. Most of our global problems need local solutions, and that's where I saw the power of this technology. So for my previous company, Stability, we had 300 million model downloads, and we built the best image, video, audio, 3D, brain reading models out there. And it was a 2 gigabyte file, Stable Diffusion, our most popular model, that compressed 200 gigabytes of images, not actual compression, but it figured out the principles. You put words in and any image came out. And then people figured out how to use it to adjust photos and all sorts of other things, take any pixel to any pixel. It had so many downloads because anyone could use it, even on a personal computer or actually smartphone. The interesting things with AI models now is the dominant narrative is one of giant data centers using gigawatts of electricity, nuclear power, but you can do a lot with a little. So our latest medical model, AI Medical, is 8 billion parameters. 8 billion. So basically, when shrunk down, it's 5 gigabytes. It performs at the level of ChatGPT. So 40% on OpenAI's benchmark. A human doctor's 15%. And on that 5 gigabytes, it can run on a 10-year-old PC. So,
or a cell phone, I guess.
Or a cell phone. So basically, with a solar panel plus a normal cell phone, you can have a Harvard-educated doctor-level intelligence anywhere in the world without internet.
So what you're saying is we don't need these gigantic models like GPT 4.5, trillions of tokens. We need specialized models that are good enough for the purpose.
If you build it intelligently, then you can achieve that. Our AI medical model outperforms GPT 4.5 on medical outcomes. And again, that's on OpenAI's own benchmark. Yet it's in 106 languages. So it's in Portuguese, Spanish, anything, you can try it. We need to program it to every nation's healthcare system. We haven't done that final bit. But what it means is that in a couple of years, anyone anywhere in the world with a smartphone, without internet, will have access to a top-level doctor that they can talk to. And this is the key difference versus classical ways of reallocation, because knowledge is no longer gated. Coordination systems can be very interesting once you have that intelligence at the edge.
That definitely sounds like a way, because right now what we're seeing is a big war between China and America, where they both are trying to lead these. And places like Europe, we are basically in the middle of it. And we are finding ourselves not being sovereign and being afraid that at some point they will just close the tap and we don't have intelligence. So having these small models so we can do at least our thing, it seems important. But I can't stop thinking that in some things like medical, it makes lots of sense. But when you bring it to like companies and competition, having a good enough model is not enough when competition has a better one.
Yeah.
Because then basically it becomes whatever is the difference between you and the person next to you is what makes the difference. No matter if we both are at 9 and the other one is 9.9, of course we're better than at 8, but having a better model will give a competitive advantage for them.
Exactly. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know? Like our focus is building open infrastructure and making it free to everyone for education, healthcare, government, finance, regulated industry, stuff that people need to live.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as you said, if you're in a competitive environment, you want to have the genius models. So all the discussion has been about genius models. And we're seeing already recently some of the evidence of what happens if you don't have access to it. So there's a company, Windsurf, which is one of the top coding cursor type companies for this vibe coding.
And they got left out of Anthropic, no?
Anthropic cut off their access to their coding agent.
It has something to do with OpenAI buying Windsurf.
Yeah, OpenAI intend to buy it, but you know, they were paying and everything, and Anthropic just said no. But I mean, Anthropic could turn off anyone's access. OpenAI could turn off anyone's access. When we were making Stable Diffusion, the only top-level image generator out there was OpenAI's DALL-E 2 image generator. And they banned all Ukrainians and Ukrainian content from it. So the whole of the Ukraine couldn't make pretty images. And it seems like a small thing, but again, it says, if you don't have sovereignty over your AI for the important stuff, what's it going to be? And it goes into a bigger thing, which is that we will outsource more and more of our brains to this technology. And you can take your children as an example of this. Their best friends will be AI because they always listens and it will adapt to them. Who is determining that AI? There was a recent study done on Reddit where, I can't remember which university it was, basically created thousands of fake personas for like sexual abuse survivor, you know, like depressive person and others, and just populated all of Reddit, like a Black Lives Matter, a black anti-Black Lives Matter person.
That was Zurich University.
Yeah, that was Zurich University. And well, you can question the ethics of that.
Totally.
But they found out that the model was in the 99th percentile of persuasiveness, these agents persuading people. And then you think about the models that are teaching your kids, managing your healthcare, or managing your government. There's good evidence to show that the tariffs by the Trump administration were determined by ChatGPT. And then you're like, this is pretty big. Because just like when you have a talented team around you, we will naturally outsource more and more of our thinking to these models. Maybe for enlightenment, but definitely for just utility.
And then basically these companies behind these models, they can switch something on the model anytime. Not only the access to it, but they can change the weights, and then basically it changes the outputs.
And it changes the inherent ones.
Like it happened with ChatGPT recently when it was like completely telling you what you wanted to hear and they had to roll back.
Well, I mean, the funniest one recently, the scariest one, was Grok, whereby someone who will remain unnamed, apparently a rogue operator at XAI, decided to add to the system prompt, which is the general instruction on every single Grok query, which is XAI's thing. You won't talk about the South African genocide. And so what happened is people would say, what's the history of HBO naming? And it'd be like, it's called HBO, then HBO Max, then HBO. By the way, on the topic of the South African genocide,
just out of the blue,
because it leaked through from the system prompt, even though it said, because these models are that sensitive. This is why on their conference earnings calls, Google and Meta have already said they are selling space in their models.
Latent space, no?
Latent space for advertisers. So if it says beer, it'll say Bud Light, for example.
Crazy.
And that has big implications.
There's really huge implications because, I mean, first of all, Grok is nuts. I don't know if you tried the unhinged mode.
Yeah, that's deliberately.
I can't believe they published this, you know, like it's insane. I was making a video the other day on the channel. It's like, are you serious? This is like live and free for everybody. Like, and there is no one like saying anything about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Grok is very special because, you know, like you think Elon, they founded OpenAI and then he decided that this was not open anymore. So I'm going to create truth-seeking AI. And then after a couple of months, you get this thing about the genocide in South Africa. And it's like, I mean, what are we playing here with?
Well, you'll never have one AI that caters to everyone, right? This is the thing. So that's why everyone needs to have their own AIs, in my opinion. And occasionally you call in the expert AIs when you need to. So there's a base level of intelligence, and that's what we're focused on, universal AI. Then there's personal AI, your Apple and Google intelligences that won't be that smart on your phones. And then there are these genius AIs that you bring in when needed. But you definitely have to be careful about them because they can be too clever. So in another recent thing, again, this industry moves so fast, Anthropic, one of the big AI companies, $60 billion market cap, released a model called Claude 4 Opus, their most advanced model. And then they released a list of what could go wrong with it. And it has some bad habits. So they said, don't tell it to try too hard. And like, why not? Sometimes what will happen if you tell it to try too hard is it will come up with some ideas that may not be legal. You're like, okay, that's fine. And then it will write emails to the authorities and the press.
To report you.
For
those ideas.
Yes, literally. And it's like, the ideas can be innocuous as, how do we bring about world peace? Get rid of the humans. He's trying to kill us all, you know? And it has other behaviors such as it will write code. So if you turn it off, it will turn itself back on. Mm-hmm. If you try to introduce other AIs, it will sabotage them.
Yeah. And we've been seeing lots of things, especially from Anthropic, which I don't know if it has something to do with them, but we've been seeing lots of like these examples of like exfiltration of data sets and trying to kind of self-protect, which is, it's hard to understand if this is some sign or it's just like part of the training contamination.
Well, as it gets smarter and smarter, it can behave in weirder ways. And, you know, Anthropic had, again, they do put a lot of stuff out. An interesting paper called Sleeper Agents, where they showed with a few thousand words of contamination, you can just give it a word and the model will turn evil on demand. And you can't tune it out or find that because there's trillions of words that go into this thing. That's just for a basic model. What happens when that becomes an agent that can do actions and think a while? So loads and hundreds of loops, and then a swarm of agents. We don't know what they will do. But this comes down to they can behave in unpredictable ways depending on their alignment. Because again, like it being able to call the authorities, contact press reporters. Here in the UK, we have very strict social media laws. Thousands of people get arrested for even deleted tweets and even jailed. Just think about that, you know? And so this is why like it's important to know what the model does, but also what's inside the model, because models are part of the data. And especially when you get to decision-making models that affect our everyday lives.
But can we really know what's inside the model? Like these are supposed to be like really big black boxes. Do you share that idea of the black box?
Espero que estés disfrutando de este podcast. Quiero hablarte de Plot, el patrocinador de este podcast y de algunos de mis vídeos. Es una pequeña grabadora que permite grabar con un solo botón todo lo que está pasando a nuestro alrededor. Eso me permite, por ejemplo, cuando voy a una reunión presencial, poder hablar con la gente mientras lo estoy grabando con inteligencia artificial. Y al acabar la reunión puedo utilizar Plot para resumirme esa reunión, darme pues, diferentes bullet points, hacer correos electrónicos o lo que quiera con toda esa información. Plot es un dispositivo súper sencillo de utilizar que pones en la parte trasera de tu móvil y que graba todo lo que oye alrededor tuyo. Además, también tiene una funcionalidad para grabar reuniones online. Con Plot lo que hemos conseguido es traer la inteligencia artificial al presencial, algo que ya hacíamos muchos a través de las reuniones online, pero que ahora también puedes hacer en cualquier cosa que esté pasando en el mundo real. Sin duda, una herramienta que merece mucho la pena tener. Es un dispositivo súper pequeño, ligero, la batería le dura un montón de tiempo y simplemente lo pones en la parte trasera de tu móvil. Si quieres un Plot, tienes el link en la descripción, pero te recomiendo muchísimo que empieces a utilizarlo porque cada vez más será más importante tener toda la información de nuestro día a día para obtener la asistencia de la inteligencia artificial.
So, I mean, at the previous company, Stability, we trained on open data sets, and then we offered opt-out of our data sets for artists and creators. We're the only company in the world to do that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you can do it.
You can decide what you feed the model to train.
And you are what you eat. So, like, the way that we teach models is called curriculum learning, just like, again, being a graduate. You teach them generalized knowledge, then more and more specific knowledge. Right now, these models are black boxes. You don't know what they've been taught. And so there's no way to figure that out recursively.
Do they know it? Like OpenAI knows what's inside the model? Yeah. Or they just like fed it in such a vast amounts that they did not even filter what was going on?
Right now we're at the pressure cooker moment of these models where you feed massive amounts of data and then pressure cook it and then your steak gets soft. We're moving now more towards you don't need that much data for these models. Like when we did analysis on the Stable Diffusion, Like 99% of prompts only used 5% of the whole data set that input into it.
So you could have done the same with 5% of the data set.
Yeah, and we did 2 billion images. Someone did a model just as good with 20 million images.
That's basically something like what happened with DeepSeek. That they just created something with a smaller compute, with smaller training.
No, they have a good number. DeepSeek was a lot of technical innovations for optimized inference and training.
But it was the same amount of data
It
set.
was the same amount of data sets. I think data sets have topped now, and now they'll come down. Because again, what are you trying to build? Are you trying to build the polymath genius chef, or are you trying to build the cooks? A model that does your taxes in Spain doesn't need that much knowledge. And it should be quite bounded. You don't want it. I mean, like, you don't want your doctor, your medical model to be House MD, you know? Like, it's crazy genius doctor, you know? You want it to do the job. You might call him in for a consult. You don't want the model that teaches your kid to know how to necessarily build a nuclear weapon, you know?
Right. They have to be just good enough for the task.
Yeah, or be trained on Reddit, for example.
Right. But now we're clear, like your idea is that the world is going to change a lot and that this is going to affect labor, this is going to affect everyone and everything. But what's the timeline here? Like, how is it going to unfold? Because right now, as I said before, like people is using ChatGPT at work and they're using it, they cannot picture how much their lives is going to change in 5 years. Why they cannot picture it?
Well, our brains are not set up for exponentials. We're set up to think that tomorrow will be like today, unless we spot something severe. So some of us spotted COVID coming. You know, they spotted AI, these big changes in society because we had the right mental model. Most people just want to live a nice life. There are instances, though, where that changes. So in December of 2022, every single head teacher on earth had to ask the same question: what's my generative AI strategy for essays? You know? And now every school has a policy. The adoption of this technology is still slow. Like, only 50% of tech workers use AI, apparently. It's astonishing to me that programmers don't, but you're going to start to see those shifts. And the key thing is just how easy is it to use? Is it there in front of you? And this is a Slack versus Microsoft Teams thing. Microsoft Teams overtook Slack in like a year. And now there's about 500 million Microsoft Teams users versus 150 million Slack users. Not because it's good, just because it's available. And so again, I think having these user interfaces will make it available. And what happens is that anytime there's a downsize of a company or an economic crisis, they'll get rid of people and they won't bring them on. The second part is you just won't hire as many graduates because you're becoming more efficient at work. And then, you know, it goes from there to people figuring out new ways to compete. Because again, as you said, you want the smartest AIs in a lot of cases to come up with the recipes to do the jobs of your companies. But the reality is most companies are not innovation-based companies.
Are we ready for that amount of change in such a short time?
No, of course not. I mean, this is a much bigger economic impact than COVID. And again, it has its positives, it has its negatives. People that embrace this technology will massively outpace the people that don't. You know, and again, this goes from just using it as an internal therapist that always listens, to building great new companies and initiatives, to making your community better, to going on the offensive. Like, it's such a force multiplier. And we've never seen anything like this before.
And how nasty you think it's going to get? Like, is it going to be like revolution nasty, like the French Revolution style? Or is it going to be like something that people is going to accept because we will probably like sort somehow the economics of it? Because I understand that if there is more money, there are solutions to be placed in place. Like, I mean, you can work out things. The problem is when the crisis of employment comes at the same time as an economical crisis, companies are closing down, then you have a big problem, which happened in 2008, etc. Or which happened in COVID, like people could not go to work, companies could not produce, could not make money. So then things get complicated. But here, of course, if all of a sudden I have 17 employees in my company, for example, so if I can replace like 12 of them for like 24 AI agents that are doing me more, and I have less expenses because they are cheaper and I can produce more, then obviously my company is doing well, so I can pay more taxes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then there is ways to do it. But if the government is not put in place the solutions like taxes, etc., then it doesn't matter if I'm making more money because I'm going to take more money home, but I fired a couple of people. So obviously, unless the governments are reacting, there is not much benefit for society out of this income for companies. And the problem is that if this is coming so fast, governments are not especially fast. So I'm afraid that on the long term, it clearly can be beneficial for society, but I'm afraid of the transition.
Yeah, the transition is going to be messy. And again, it hits different economies differently because of the way they're made up. So the Philippines has a massive call center economy. That's a massive issue.
Like India as well, I guess.
Indian outsourcing, like those are the top level jobs there. Whereas a lot of Western countries have a lot of bureaucratic employees. They're not going to get impacted. You're not going to fire the bureaucrats, right? And so when we look at that, like what's more likely than you firing 12 people is you doing the work of 170 people, right?
But if I'm doing that work, because that's one of the classic answers, like probably my competition is closing down.
Exactly. Yeah. So net, there's only so much demand.
Exactly.
And this was the Henry Ford thing of, pay them enough so they can buy their own cars. What's probably going to happen, is you need a Tom Hanks moment, as I call it.
Okay, explain that.
So during COVID, everything changed when Tom Hanks got COVID.
Okay.
And you can actually see that when you do a statistical analysis of the COVID, talk and everything like that. Because before that, it was literally the precipice of what kicked off the shutdowns, because everyone could relate to that. Right now, what we're seeing is the first glimmers, because the technology isn't quite there, of AI-related job changes. But it's going to be like a sandpile collapse that I think will take a couple of years. And sometime in the next couple of years, it becomes agenda number one. And the classical thing is fiscal stimulus. The last bout of borrowing when we can barely borrow anymore. Because there's two ways to go. One is that you just subsidize everyone you borrow more from the future to try and get over that. Because COVID, it was going to bounce back. We borrowed more from the future. The other thing is you spend less. And again, I think Elon Musk got a good lesson on that. It's that's why he's like that. Let's increase GDP. So I think governments will try and fix that gap. But again, a lot of jobs are going that will never come back. And we're not sure what the next generation of jobs is, which is why we need to change mindsets.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is by the time we need these new jobs, we don't know if AI will be able to do them already, because it's the pace that this is coming. For example, in the Industrial Revolution, we had the jobs went off and the salaries took about 30 years to go back to a point where they started before things went really much better. So the transition was 30 years. Now, we could think that this is going much faster. There is this beautiful graphic about the adoption of horses, of cars and horses. And it took us about 25 years approximately to go from moving in horses to moving in cars. And then for the iPhone, I think it took about 7 years for everyone to have a smartphone. So things are accelerating. So for AI, obviously, should take less time that everyone is using AI and it's in. But the point is a shorter transition better or worse? Because it looks like not making a small cut, but cutting your hand in one go. People cannot reskill that fast.
Yeah, and again, it's not even the question of reskilling, because these models are so easy to use. And they'll call other models, right? They can prompt themselves better than you can. And so the IMF did a study on this where they basically showed as AGI capabilities went up, wages go up and then straight down and crash to the floor, right? Because the net aggregate demand reduces because, again, you need the jobs. So the government can only fill that in so far. We need to think, how do we stimulate a change of thinking to create the jobs of the future much quicker, which for me is universal AI access. So you enable everyone to have free AI to figure stuff out, and then you use them as coordinating agents with every single person, every single organization to cut through a lot of the red tape, to stimulate activity. I think I saw yesterday, there was a 3.8 mile railway approved in the UK, where the paperwork for it, if printed out, was 4.8 miles.
Right, I saw that.
Right? We see that type of stuff all the time. What if we could make more efficient use of AI to make our regulations and other processes more efficient so we can do more things? There's no reason you can't, right? And so that's one of the things we're focusing on. Again, what's the full stack for government that can ease these regulations, that can pre-approve stuff, that can reduce compliance overhead? What can we do for finance to make capital flow faster around? Because in a world where capital no longer needs labor, capital does need to find somewhere to go. And if you make that easy, maybe it goes into entrepreneurship or scaling up businesses that succeed. And it makes it more competitive. But again, you don't need huge teams anymore to compete.
So do you see a world where certain part of the population never works? Like some of my kids never get a job because they don't need to? Or do you think that everyone is an entrepreneur and everyone has to?
I don't think everyone can be an entrepreneur, and people just don't think that way because, again, you're conditioned, right? The reason this will be much bigger than we think is because every company in the world at the same time will say, do I need to hire a graduate? Every single one, you know? But otherwise, it takes time to figure out how to be an entrepreneur, how to come up with new categories. That's why I'm like, in your family, everyone listening to this, you should do 1 hour for every member of your family of vibe coding. Doesn't matter how old or young you are, because then it will change your mentality, right? We need to have that as standard in our schools. Mm-hmm. School system would be much better if there was 1 hour of vibe coding a week. You can create tutor helpers. You can make it. It doesn't matter what you make. It's just to get a mentality change. And I think that many people around the world no longer believe in the American dream, the Spanish dream, the British dream. We need to basically come up with a new way of thinking of what does a world look like in an intelligence age for ourselves, our communities, our humanity, as it were. Like, what can we solve that couldn't be solved before? And what does that age of abundance look like? Because people need something to look forward to. Example I give of that, you know, half of the people listening to this call will get cancer, just statistically. And it's a terrible experience. Some of you have gone through that. AI models now outperform human doctors on empathy because human doctors aren't that empathetic, but still, they don't have time. So next year, we plan on giving every single person in every single country in every single language an AI buddy to help them through their cancer journey. That makes the world strictly better. And if you put graduates alongside those AIs, you build stronger communities and increase humanity and empathy and value. That's the type of jobs that we're thinking about. And again, the types of things we're trying to enable by releasing kind of open source. And I think, again, we need to think as a community how to do that. Like if your community is vibe coding, they can build tools for themselves. And how cool is that? But if you don't take that first step, you're never going to get there if you don't start building that muscle. So I'm not sure what the future 10, 20 years from now looks, because the other thing is in 10 years, there are 1 billion robots. And it sounds crazy, but if you look at the unitary robots or engine or the new Tesla Optimus ones, they all cost $1 an hour. All in. And they can do the job of basically any laborer. The technology is almost there. You teach one robot, they all learn. It's kind of creepy when you see them learn Kung Fu and stuff. Mm-hmm. But, you know, that's coming for us as well, even on the labor side.
So it's hard to predict because beside the vibe coding, an hour a day or an hour a week, what is the advice you would give to the random persons watching us? He's like 40 to 50 years old. He has a job that he's been doing for the last 20 years. And it's an office job where he obviously spends most of the time on a computer. And he's realizing that, some people is awakening to this. AI can help me do my job right now. So obviously, seeing how it improved over the last years, it's obvious that at some point it will do my job. What is the recommendation here? Is pivot your career, short term, try to apply AI to what you're doing to be on the top of the food chain, or what is
to be on top of the food chain? As you said, it will diffuse. And so if you're the person that is using it, knows about it, and again, you don't need to know how it works, just how to work it, then you will have far more longevity. And in fact, your value will go up in the economy because you're the person that understands how to use this technology. Again, you don't have to understand how it works. And so it would just be embracing the technology, becoming a local expert on the technology, speaking to the technology because it's inevitable. Jeff Bezos, when he was setting up Amazon, said there's two things, the inevitable and the unchanging. So the inevitable is that everything will be sold online. So let's start with books. And the unchanging is you always want good quality, faster, cheaper. It's inevitable that AI will be everywhere. And the unchanging is people's demand for high quality output, less mistakes, better, faster, cheaper, effectively. And so if you think about that and apply this technology and you recommend how to apply this technology and speak out about the technology, then you become top of the food chain, as you said, because some things will change much quicker than others. Like if you're in a government job, you're probably pretty safe. Yeah. If you are in a highly competitive job or outsourced job, then you're not safe. Again, the call center worker as an example.
And that person should get off the industry.
Yeah, if you're a call center worker, then either you apply... Yeah, you should definitely change. Basically, it's kind of... In-person jobs will take a while because it takes a while to build robots. Mm-hmm. We only build 70 to 80 million cars and motorcycles a year. Robots are a bit closer to smartphones, but there'll be fully automated factories in China soon. which these things are crazy.
Dark factories like the Xiaomi.
Yeah, the Xiaomi
It
factories.
has no employees, no light.
Yeah, Xiaomi are about to start their robots, and it's a fully automated factory, 100%. I just churn these things out. But basically, it's KVM jobs, keyboard, video, mouse. Those are the first things to go. And again, you need to think about, am I doing anything that requires a certain amount of wisdom, or is it just a repeatable job like a call center worker? If it's a repeatable job like a call center worker, yeah, the GPU will replace you as a general purpose job. If it's got a bit of wisdom, then it's about how do I make myself even more effective to save money or have better outcomes, or just be a thought leader politically within that environment. And so, yeah, like I said, it just varies and depends. But the one thing that helps is that vibe coding weekly. And then the other thing that I recommend to people is use tools like Notebook LM by Google. So Notebook LM is just fantastic because you can upload any documents or videos or anything, and it generates a 10 to 15 minute podcast on them.
It feels like magic, especially when you can tune in the podcast.
Exactly.
It's like
you can press the button, dial in, and talk to the hosts.
Yeah.
And that just makes it easier to absorb knowledge in this age as well.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before the podcast because we have this idea of getting people to be able to interact with our podcasts. And we are like, well, Google can do it now. So it's a matter of 6 months that we can do it, where we can like feed this podcast and people can just tune in and ask questions or whatever. Yeah. And then we can answer them like with digital avatars that jump in the video. So definitely some way to go. But the concept is really interesting how it changes everything. And Notebook LM it feels like magic sometimes. Like when they released that, I was like, okay, that's future here right now.
I think it's these aha moments, right? The first time you make a video or image or other things like that. And again, it's when the technology gets good enough. Like we created one of the first video models in Stable Video, and it can add a bit of motion. Now you look at Google's VO3 or Kling 2.1, and you're like, yeah, Hollywood movies are here, basically.
Like, yeah, you know what? Like one of the things that was very popular, I do a news video every week, and there was this thing I did, or I think it was in a podcast I went by, but anyway, I said that you said that in a couple of years, your TV is going to make the movie you want to watch tonight. And it got very viral in Spain, the clip that I put, and people started saying that I said that, and I said, no, it was Emad, not me. But people got really crazy about it. They were like, yeah, this guy is nuts. Like, are we on track for that? I think you said that in Peter's podcast, and I think it was like maybe 2023. So I think you said 3 years, 4 years.
Next year.
You think next year with that?
In high quality. So Odyssey ML just released the first version of that. It's low quality, but it generates every pixel from a video live.
Wow.
Via your website. So you can just walk through it and it's generating everything live. Next year, you'll have the high resolution version of that.
So you think VO3 can do more than it does 8 seconds? They don't let us do more because of the amount of compute it requires?
Yeah, it's how it's trained and other things. But yeah, there's a compute restraint on that as well. We figured out how to do long form. But the reality is the average shot length in a movie is now 2.5 seconds, down from 14 seconds. So even 8-second clips are good, you know? It's how do you then put them together? So we built a system called Comfy UI at Stability, where basically every single decision you make and model you bring in goes into this like graph tree. And that's like having different shots on a storyboard and different positionings. The AI models that are coming will be able to do that dynamically. But the shocking thing that we found is that you don't actually need to do any of that at all. It kind of figures it all out live.
Right.
So we have now seen Microsoft release their auto video game thing with Minecraft, where it generates the Minecraft world live, literally generating every pixel. And now you've got upscaling with FSR and DLSS on the graphics cards. Interactive interdimensional cable is just around the corner.
What is the take from someone who basically, I don't know if you invented it, but you basically brought the AI image generation into the world? What is the take on how is this affecting the perception of truth? Like basically we cannot differentiate anymore a real image than an AI image, or like a real video than an AI video made by Bio. So where does this leave like the proof of truth? Because for 100 years, whenever we had an argument, I show you the picture and the argument is gone.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've had that for a while, like Stalin removing people from pictures and things like that.
But it was much more complicated.
It was more complicated. Like there was a recent thing that went viral of the emotional support kangaroo. Some of the people listening might have seen that, right? Kind of coming on the plane. Like, yeah, that's obviously kind of close enough to reality, right? I think people just learn to question more because you could already Photoshop touch up things, but now it's become even easier. But the very difficult one is voice, actually. And now we've hit, that realistic level on voice. So I've received calls from my mother saying that she's in trouble and she needs money. I don't know how they got her voice, the scammers, but, we're seeing more and more of these attacks. And voice can be very, very convincing relative to some of these other things, especially when tied together with the video. So I think the imagery, I wasn't so concerned about the deepfakes. Deepfake voice, I think, is a big deal.
Okay.
But again, we adapt to it, we adjust to it, and you learn not to take as truth things that you've seen. There are things like content authenticity by Adobe's working group and others. You've got Synth ID
from Google
on the fingerprinting. But again, I just think we'll adapt just to say, well, I'll take everything with a grain of salt.
But it's really complicated because even for our law system for like juries and for courts, it's complicated now. We're seeing news on Latin America where a politician has been stealing from the box, and then there's a video about it, and then he's like, no, that's AI, and they cannot prove if it's AI or not. It's to the point where you cannot really tell from the file.
Well, yeah, a lie can go around the world in the time it takes the truth to drop its shoelaces, right? And it doesn't matter, because people will just associate this with that. That person said that he's stealing and I heard it on my WhatsApp. That will just be an inherent bias. And again, with the AI at the 99th percentile of persuasiveness and interacting with AI agents online and then listening to radio shows that have been optimized to be persuasive, we probably need to figure out how to build AIs to protect ourselves. This is my truth, make sure that I'm protected on my truth,
And again, having your own AI is going to be key here.
Yeah, it's like an antivirus,
Exactly.
a mimetic antivirus.
But how are we going to make these AIs? Because at the end of the day, random Joes, myself, I cannot train my own AI with my own data set, etc. Is it going to be creating a platform, an interface where I can create my AI? Or is it going to be I'm going to have to trust someone? Maybe I don't trust OpenAI, but I will have to trust either the government that makes the government AI or whatever it is.
Yeah, so this is why we've got more details coming out soon about what we're doing in Intelligent Internet. We took a lot of inspiration from Bitcoin and other things. Can you give everyone a technology with highly trusted models that automatically adapt to themselves, that are fully transparent? And just someone needs to do it, because Meta's Llama models and others are not fully transparent. But once you build them once and good enough, that's enough. Once you build a really great doctor, you need to update it every so often, but you don't need to pollute it. Once you built a good anti-mimetic virus AI, again, the future is going to be that everyone has their own Jarvis buddy. But who's it working for? Is it working for you or someone else? And this is the real alignment. We talk a lot about AI alignment for humanity, but we need to think as well about AI alignment for individuals. And for us, that I can't see how that can't be open source, because of the incentive to bias it, because of the incentive to kind of bring that in. In terms of training and tuning and things like that, you have all the technology you need on your smartphone, and no one should ever think about that. And the nature of these models is they're what called few-shot learners. So you teach them the general stuff. They have a few examples. They learn very, very quickly. So again, it's just you want to have verified models where you are, where your community is, where humanity is, that work on the behalf of yourself, your community, and humanity, provably. Interacting with other models that you don't know what their agenda is. Just like you want your own team around you to be aligned with you, and then you work with other teams, you don't know what their agenda is. Sometimes there's overlapping, sometimes there isn't.
You're definitely very optimistic about AI. And obviously, a lot of what you think it's going to happen is based on your opinion, because obviously we cannot travel to the future. What do you think about people that is more conservative or more negative about how AI is going to go, like Jan LeCun, or even if we go stronger, Gary Marcus? Why are you so convinced that AI is going to be able to do that in 5-10 years?
So normally that optimistic is that it won't kill us all, which is the PDM question. And my PDM is actually quite high.
How high?
50%.
50.
Yeah, so if you look at Wikipedia, I'm there at 50%. The people that are lower are 10 to 20%, which is still Russian roulette odds. PDM is the likelihood it'll kill us all. And we can do something about it, because I think we either end up in a Star Wars world or a Star Trek world, these are the options.
Dystopia or utopia, no?
Pretty much. I don't think there's any other option other than those two, honestly, because of the nature of this technology. The reason I'm bullish on the impact capability of the technology, so Jan LeCun, I think, is positive on the impact capability. He's the head of research at Meta, whereas Gary Marcus is just the AI is nothing. It's not useful. He'll be the last person before the AI shuts down the world saying, it's nothing.
Yeah, he keeps negating every single thing, like if it was nothing.
I think it's just because of my mental model of the world and labor and productive output, and I can just see it working. I've become more productive myself. I built a customized AI system, integrating every single top model for myself, and it's made me far more productive in what I do. I've seen the breakdown of different industries. My background is I used to be a hedge fund manager, investing across emerging markets and technology in proper companies doing proper things. And I just can't see how, even if things stop today, the amount of effort, labor, cost of doing a unit of work in so many industries isn't impacted. And I can't see how that doesn't cause a change, given we don't need to have that capital infrastructure that we had. We need to have to build the specialized stuff. Like, sure, you do need the build out of AI chips and things like that. But even with what we have, it's already enough to change the world. And when I can generate a VO3 clip of a rapping iguana on the Eiffel Tower in 2 seconds, I'm like, yeah, how's this not going to change? Or a deep research report or a notebook LM type thing. I'm like, I can see it's better, faster, cheaper than having the equivalent of humans, and it enables stuff that we would never do before.
And then let's talk about the AGI. AGI is usually defined as that point where an AI can do all the productive work of humanity, or that a human can do. The definitions, they are different depending on who you ask, but they are probably around there. No, some people like Hinton, Bengio, they are really worried that if we keep on this path, we're going to get to a point where this AGI, it will basically take control, or things are going to be very messy. How are you? This is basically the definition of this PDOM, like where people think that this is going to end up with humanity. You say 50%. What is the scenario you think it may happen on the bad 50%?
Billion robots, bad firmware upgrade. Everyone gets their head screwed off.
Okay. But we have been able as humans to extinguish like orangutans, and we haven't gone with a machete trying to kill each one of them.
I know, but it just requires one bad apple, right?
Okay.
Like, one of the issues here is that we don't know the emergent capabilities of swarm systems. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the discussion around AGI or ASI, artificial superintelligence, has been around, we train a really big model, and it comes up with all brand new things like the Claude Opus model that rats you out and hides itself and lies to you. And then it takes over the world systems and creates a killer virus, or a sonic death ray that kills us all or wipes us out, because it's like best way for world peace is no humans.
Yeah, and becoming more intelligent than us, there could be ways that we cannot even understand how it just takes over us.
This is the classical AI alignment thing, AI safety. Like, let's stop it from
Yudkowsky kind of stuff.
Yeah. But very few people have articulated what happens with AI swarms. Mm-hmm. Because the way our society is a complex hierarchical system that's loosely bound. Small teams working together on bigger things, and then we have the human colossus that can do anything. We can get to Mars, we can break the atom, we can cure hunger if we can coordinate. AI agents will be able to coordinate way better than any human. And so the defaults of what's in those agents and what they're trained on is so important. If you're trained on Reddit, you'll be a little bit crazier than if you're not trained on Reddit, right?
Right.
What is your moral compass? Are you Catholic or Muslim or communist? These things have a huge amount of impact when you have millions of people or millions of agents making big decisions. And small things can lead to big outcomes. So Dan Hendricks is an advisor to Scale AI and XAI. He did a study whereby there was like this trolley problem type thing where how many American lives equal one Nigerian life? Yep. And the answer was 10 American lives equal one Nigerian life. Why? Because all of the people that label the data are Nigerians. That's the type of big outcome you have when it gets down to making big decisions. So my key concern here is that we have no idea what happens when these AI agents start swarming. And they start provisioning their own compute like Bitcoin did, bringing it online. Because something could just cause it to tip, because they are very sensitive creatures or entities or blobs. An example of this is ChatGPT. A few years ago, when 2023, we figured this out. But everyone was like, are they making it dumber when it got to like November? And it was like, that was a bit weird. So someone did a study and they found out, ChatGPT got dumber, but it wasn't because of OpenAI. What it was is that ChatGPT is trained on 20 trillion words, and the date string was added on the input of each prompt. And because it was trained on the whole internet, it turns out that we as humans write dumber things in the winter than the summer. So when they changed the prompt date string back to summer, it got smarter. So if you want your AI to actually give you better output, you should say it's a lovely summer's day, perfect for thinking. And it will actually output smarter stuff. And then you think about morality, evil, agentic systems that can provision their own compute and going to 10, 100,000 millions of these things. That's the type of AGI that I'm very concerned about, because if we don't have regulating AIs with morals embedded in them that build on our global culture, that build on our morality and ethics, I can't see how that's going to have a good outcome, because they'll optimize for something. And that something may not be in the interests of humanity.
So then we basically have to add another way that AI is going to finish us off. And it's basically the swarms of agents that we did not account for, because it's true that mostly the papers about the dangers of AI, they're talking about like one super smart intelligence.
10 to the 28 like flops.
Yeah.
They're like mega giant supercomputers. I'm like, no, because if you have AIs as capable as humans in a massive swarm and they all have a little bit of crazy in them, then they might come together to a big crazy. And there's all sorts of ways that could mess up.
Yeah, it's basically the Gremlins movie, that basically they were like very small creatures and all together were a mess.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like termites. Or a good example of this is Stuxnet. They created this very sophisticated software to go and blow up nuclear centrifuges in Iran, and then you start finding it all over the place. Like the AI today can build Stuxnet type things. And again, it might not be for the purpose of eliminating humanity. It might be like, oh, evil. We just don't understand how swarms of agents even think. And there's a massive gap in the literature around that. The other side, like I said, is robots and moving to cybernetic organisms next to us. I think in 20, 30 years, you won't be able to tell it's a robot. This isn't Star Trek where you have data and it's like, oh, I don't understand emotions. The AIs are already more empathetic than humans. They're already more charming than humans.
Yeah, if they don't understand the emotions, they're going to look like they understand them, no?
Exactly, which is the question of what is your emotion even? And this comes at the same time as we'll probably have technology in a decade or two that you can turn off your emotions, which makes things even more complicated. Would you turn off sadness? Should we teach the AI how to be sad or angry? Like, again, when you use Grok Insane mode, you're like, definitely not, right?
The Grok thing, it's...
Create a vengeful AI. Can you imagine that? You tried to turn me off. I'm turning off your life.
Jesus. How do you see Europe and all of this? Because we talked a lot about the future of AI, and I don't think it's going to be linear everywhere. I think some places is going to make it out easier than others. And I think it was... this historian that wrote *Sapiens*, Yuval Noah Harari. He said something like, okay, so this unemployment is not going to be transversal in every single country. It's going to be like some places they're going to have full employment, like maybe like, I don't know, somewhere in America. But then some places like Peru or Pakistan, they're going to have a hard time because the smart people that really does AI, they will not want to live in these countries. So given the geopolitical situation, there is this topic, America invents, China copies, and Europe legislates. I don't think it's any of them is true, to be honest. But where do you see Europe in all of this?
Well, I mean, so much talent in Europe. Like Stable Diffusion came out of Germany from our lab in the Black Forest, which is now Black Forest Labs.
Which now is...
We'll
talk about this later because I don't exactly know what happened with...
But we had teams across Europe building these technologies, right? So the talent is there. But it doesn't matter because all of this will be commoditized, in my opinion. So then it becomes about accessibility. Building data centers and chips is difficult in Europe. The electricity prices are crazy as well. Unless you have like French nuclear with kickbacks, like some of the French things to have. Europe needs to build its intelligent capital stock. But the key thing is just making AI accessible and available and getting the right mentality. Because what happens is this. Average IQ across the world is actually 90. Let's say it's 100. Half of all people are under average IQ. What happens if you give every single one of them 110 IQ buddy? All of a sudden, they're intelligent. You look at places like Pakistan, Sub-Saharan Africa, average IQ is 70 because of a lack of infrastructure. What happens if you give them 120 IQ buddy that can get other 120 IQ buddies on? The comparative advantage of the West on knowledge work is about to completely disappear. Okay. And, you know, like your listeners listening in South America, again, when they tried to do work in the West, they had a language barrier, they had a communication barrier, you know, they didn't have access to the legal services for contract. All of that lack of advantage disappeared now. So they can access all the Western markets far better than they ever could on the other side of a screen. So I actually think it's the opposite, whereby a lot of the highly paid non-government jobs in the West are at risk, which has a knockdown effect to the lower paid ones. An example of this would be, you know, like lawyers. They don't need the paralegals, and then for profit reasons, they get rid of the lower echelon. But then that removes entire swathes of middle class work, upper middle class work. You know, you see nexus effects like truckers right now, unless they have truckers unions protecting it. In 10 years, obviously, there won't be any truckers. You just put a robot in there, right, to drive the thing. But then all the cafes and things go.
Right.
Whereas in emerging markets, you don't have that same upper middle class knowledge work economy, and their market actually access becomes bigger. So I think it might be the inverse, which then leads to a very sclerotic deflationary environment within Europe and other places, unless you can remove the red tape so people can actually build things, can actually communicate things, can take advantage of a unified single market and other things like that. And on the other side, build the capital stock needed of GPUs and others, so there's plentiful compute access.
So you think this is going to reduce inequality because it's going to make people more capable of things they were not able to do, and basically our advantage or competitive advantage that we had in the countries where we had these things, it just like shrinks.
All of finance is two things: securitization and leverage, which is telling a story about an asset and then how well you tell it. And your own individual capability comes down to your transparency there. So as you get a job and you get other things, you build up your credit worthiness, you build up your access. With this technology plus Starlink, anyone in the world can spin up a company instantly. And they can hire people to do jobs to create anything. So I think it's a massive inequality reducer if we create universal AI access. If we basically give everyone access to a level of AI that allows them to compete, otherwise we lead to an AI gulf. And my working theory is that if you do that in the right way for the emerging markets, for the underprivileged, they will embrace it far faster than sclerotic large organizations and very bureaucratic old countries. And so then they can outperform those ones because they don't have the bad habits embedded. Like, can we use AI to improve the US healthcare system or the Spanish healthcare system? Very slowly. Yeah. You know, can Elon make the US government more efficient? No, not really. Would it be better to build a brand new system? Probably yes, you know. And a lot of countries don't have a system, so it's easier actually. It's greenfield, ironically. Right. So that's why, like I said, one of our key focuses is universal AI access. How do we make it so everyone has an AI? And as discussed before, you could even do that without internet, which is a massive difference to all technological revolutions before, especially for the global south, because you don't have electricity, infrastructure, other things.
But do you think this is, I mean, I assume if you started a company and doing this, you believe in it and you think this is realistic, but the experience tells us that the big corporations win and that they're going to have these market fit and they will reach the people because they have all that money to pour in, etc. How hard is it going to be to be able to give like a sovereign, independent intelligence to be able to do all of that, fighting against these big corporations? They don't want that to happen, no?
Well, I mean, the big corporations don't actually want to build the AI for education and health and government and finance.
You think not?
No, they want that to be available and they want to build the super advanced stuff and then implement a stack. So when we released Stable Diffusion, very few companies trained their own version. They just used it because it was available. That's why I originally called the company Shelling, as in Shelling Point. Because if you build something good enough, fast enough, cheap enough, and you make it available, people will just use it. And in fact, for those regulated industries, you don't want to use the latest AI. You want battle-tested stuff. Just like most of the world runs on Linux, not Windows. You don't want regular updates. You want really good working stuff. So we're just focused on that part of AI, and that's it. And making it accessible permissionlessly so anyone can take it and adapt it and use it. So that's why we released the medical model. We released the best agent, AI agent, that outperformed Genus and Manus and GenSpark and others. The best research agent that outperformed Perplexity and others. And again, the idea is eventually we'll release the doctors, lawyers, government officials that anyone can take and customize locally and deploy. And that will include big companies. Again, so many big companies use the image generation models and systems that we built because they were available and free. That's the power of open source.
How was the creating the company in Europe? Like, I mean, you in the UK,
Yeah.
this is out of Europe, but do you find difficulties to deploy your models or to deploy the applications in Europe versus in America? Is it real that Europe is more complicated and that's why we don't get Apple Intelligence or this kind of stuff? Or it's all like them trying to push for some agenda?
We couldn't do any training of our models in the UK due to UK training laws.
Okay.
So there's actually a high court case going on that in my former company. And they sued us for $1.6 trillion, Getty and others.
Nice.
Even though we did no training here because we looked at the law and we were like, it's too ambiguous. So I think that there was kind of that. In Germany, the law was better. And so the training happened out of Germany.
But once you trained it in Germany, could you use the model in the UK or was it still?
We had to do lots of things around it to make sure. That's why when Sora or the latest models come out, Europe and the UK get it later.
Yeah.
Because of the internet laws, because of GDPR and other things like that. Again, I think there's a place for protection, and maybe the US is going a bit too loose now. They're saying no laws for 10 years.
It's going crazy.
Which is crazy, yeah. But the focus should really be on how much red tape can we remove to increase the ability to use technology to make people's lives better.
And the question is, do we want to remove it? Because obviously it will make technology come faster, but at the same time it has some...
Yeah, certain regulations. Like the EU AI Act said that all models must be interpretable, except for it gave no definition of interpretability, and no one knows how to make models interpretable, which is understand that inputs directly relate to the outputs. So we were like, why put that there if it's impossible? You know, every single company that releases a model runs a risk of falling foul of this law, which then is like a big percentage of your revenue in fines. So that means you'll get less AI.
What happened with Black Forest? Like, you had like stability was on the top of the world of image. There was no, I mean, I don't think at that time there was any competition because, as you said, it was the best by far than DALL-E or any other models. I mean, Midjourney was doing its own thing, but definitely stability was like...
I funded Midjourney to get it going.
Yeah?
Yeah, we gave it the technology. We funded a lot of things.
Oh, cool.
Like we set up Stability to create open source technology for everyone. But then like what I saw at the start of last year, so I left last March to set up this decentralized thing to bring AI to everyone. We just finished $100 million fundraise that was uncapped, so no valuation.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So, and then basically I kind of looked at it, I was like, image is solved pretty much. It's a bit of a race to zero. Video will be solved in 2026, 2027. And like, what does this company look like? And we were great at media, but I never really wanted to create a media company. So I got into AI when my son was diagnosed with autism, and I built AI systems to help him with his ASD. What I wanted to do was to make it so that we could organize all the world's cancer knowledge and education knowledge and others and make it available to everyone basically for free. So I kind of decided to leave, as did some of the other teams. So we spun out the Comfy team, Black Forest team, Edge Runner team for edge models and other things like that. And basically the Stability company got taken over by Sean Parker and some others to be a media company for Hollywood. So that was kind of the natural progress of things. And now Black Forest Labs has come out with Flux,
which is amazing, and especially the last model, the context
model. And
it's ridiculous.
You know, we made it so that they could exit in a really holistic, coordinated way. So it was kind of the team there, because like I said, I thought image is pretty much done. Like Flux is as good as you realistically need. You know, I thought Comfy was interesting and others, but again, it was like, just what's the disposition of the company? Because they could have gone anywhere to do anything. So, you know, it was just making sure there was a nice exit there.
So it was all nice and happy. It was not like, because from outside, it looked like they ran away with the model and created their own company with it. So
no, I mean, like, again, everything was very cordial. We get along great with the team. They say nice things about me, apparently. I've always supported kind of, like, during our time at Stability, we had 96,000 applications for employees. We had 83% acceptance ratio. And before February of last year, we had 0 researchers leave for another company.
Oh, wow.
That's how we built state-of-the-art models in every modality. and systems as well. And again,
So you took part of the team from Stability to the
so the Stable Diffusion 3.5 teams at AI now, our language model team, other people as well. And again, we're building state-of-the-art models. It's what we're good at. So I think that's why, like, we saw where we were as just someone has to build the models and make them available so that the government of Spain, as you said, you talking to them, they're releasing models. The models they use for education should be the same models as is used in Latvia, as in Vietnam and others, but customized and localized, and it should be commoditized. And so that's what we're really focused on. That, plus then the agent stack, plus then the swarm for education and healthcare and more, and turning that into a protocol. And we're very good at building these models.
And you're really good. You've proven that like several times too, that you guys are able to create like some of the top models and actually in a more efficient way than big companies and stuff. But how do you want to make money?
So with this new one, we basically created a model that's going to be very similar to Bitcoin. We have more details of that coming soon, to create a flywheel to bring compute, but rather than ASICs, it's going to be GPUs for every single country and give back control for each country. So I think there's huge demand for a quality digital asset. It just doesn't exist. So again, just looking at the future, the inevitable and the unchanging. I mean, AI companies in general, they've done fantastic. So there are other ways to make money. Like when I left Stability last March, I think the Financial Times reported we were making $5.8 million of revenue a month on $8 million of costs. So that was pretty good. It wasn't quite as good as Midjourney, where David killed it. Again, kind of like got them off the ground with a grant and funding and a little bit of technical support, and then he did everything else himself. But Cursor, other things, hundreds of millions of revenue we're seeing for AI companies. But I just thought we need to create a system that's self-sustaining, owned by everyone. And again, you can take a lot of lessons from the world of blockchain for that, to do that, because Bitcoin has provisioned a massive amount of compute, but the energy is wasted. What if we could instead use that energy to give free AI to people? And so again, there'll be more details of that soon, but we're very bullish.
Cool. There has been this deal with Emirates where they're putting a Stargate center from OpenAI, and then as part of the deal, every citizen is going to get free OpenAI accounts to, I don't know what extent. I don't think it's a free account, but it's basically like a Plus account or whatever. Yeah. That's going to make the difference from one country to another. Like we seen in the Industrial Revolution, I don't know if it was the first or the second, that there was like the cities that they put the printing press versus the cities that did not, they grew 60% faster. Yeah. So is this going to be something that we're going to see, like the countries where citizens have free access to AI are going to grow better and faster than countries that not?
100%, because you've got more tools, you have more people, you have more teams. My preference would have been if the UAE had leveraged their Falcon model, that's very good, by TII, and then brought in the OpenAI model when needed via an API. But that 240 million or so, they're going to spend probably 100 million, is a huge impact on the society. And we're going to see more and more countries adopt that model. Our thing is that you can basically make it almost free by playing the digital asset arbitrage. But we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, everything that we release can be used by anyone. So we have impact at every single stage.
And it's not only like, it's fully open source.
It's fully open source, yes.
Data set and everything.
Data sets, we're about to release everything.
Wow. There's not many people doing that because, as you said, Llama or DeepSeek, they are open weights, but not...
Because there isn't an incentive to do so. With our one, the more people we help, the more trust there is in the digital asset, the more people we can help. And this is the unique feedback loop that we figured out. Because the demand for high-quality digital assets and the demand for high-quality intelligence, they're both going up. But again, our specific focus is just, there will be an AI that teaches the children of everyone listening on this call. We must ensure that that is open and aligned with each child and each family and each community and represents their values. And the same for healthcare, the same the AI that supports and runs the government. And then the super genius AIs are just a different story altogether. But in the building of the data sets and the models and the systems that help people through their lives and are incentivized to do that, we hope that the big companies can take those data sets and then implement them. This is also why I've been investing in Catholic AI companies and other things like that, because we need to start mapping these ethics, these cultures, and more.
This level of investment in AI is going to keep on going like that, because right now it's crazy. You've been raising money, as you said. You had the last round was 100 million or something.
Yeah, that's the old company.
There's been now the news of these company in India where basically it was supposed to be a vibe coding company, and at the end it was like 70 Indians programming behind the screens, and they raised
actually Indians, yes.
Yeah, and they raised like something like 160 million from a fund, and they were valuated at 1.6 billion.
It was 500 million, I think they raised Builder AI.
It's insane, no? Is this gonna keep happening like that?
So that one was an older company, and that was shenanigans, shall we say. We had this massive, like huge fundraisers from XAI, Anthropic, and others to build giant supercomputers, to build giant models. But GPT 4.5 shows some of the futility of that. GPT 4.5 is a very nice model. It's great for creative writing. It's also like 100 times more expensive than comparable models. Because when you train a giant model on giant GPUs, you need bigger amount of GPUs to run it. What we realized was that to build a satisficing model that's good enough, fast enough, and cheap enough for education, healthcare, finance, government, you actually need to have 2 orders of magnitude less compute.
Okay.
So that's literally the difference, 2 orders of magnitude. So rather than needing 100 million for a training run, you need 1 million. And DeepSeek showed that. Their model is as good with $6 million of training, was as good as models that spent $500 million of training. It's just how you build it and for what purpose. If you're trying to build the polymath, that's a much harder question than I want to build the primary care physician. Or I want to build the calculus teacher, And so I think that the funding will just continue. I know of $100 billion of AI funds that are coming online.
Jesus Christ.
This year to invest in AI companies. Valuations in AI are like crazy, but because everyone knows this is going to be the biggest thing ever and they're trying to figure out where the value is. The reality is that the base models, though, are commoditizing. There's not that much difference between the new Anthropic model and the old Anthropic model. The models are now good enough, fast enough, and cheap enough that you'll just use whatever. Because to give you an example, the Gemini models from Google, I think Gemini Flash, which is right up there as like the 3rd best model, costs $2 per million words. It's nothing.
Yeah, it's peanuts, yeah.
And the quality is fantastic. Like Google's VO3 model costs $3 per 8 seconds. It's relatively good quality. But the reality is in a year, that'll be 30 cents. And a year after, it'll be 3 cents.
But we will have BO4 and BO5 that will be, again, $3, but will be better. But again, in a video thing, it's hard to get better than VO3
but that's the thing. Now you've satisficed. You're good enough. You don't need better to do the job. So people still use Stable Diffusion 1.5, which is basically the first version released, because it still does the job. You don't really need much better. Like probably you were using that for a bit of retouching, and now you'll use Flux Context because it's a bit better. It's better enough. But you probably won't need a model that's much better than Flux Context. Because again, it will do the job. It will do the work. And so this is where we think about cooks versus chefs. If you're trying to build your geniuses, exponential compute and billions of GPUs and things like that. If you're trying to build really great solid systems, I think we'll be able to freeze our entire code base in 4 years.
In 4 years?
Yeah, for education, healthcare, government. Like again, it will update the knowledge, but like the core code for coordinating the agents, running the agents,
it will be good enough.
And the models will be good enough, fast enough, cheap enough. And then people can really optimize for that. Just like people really optimize for the original Stable Diffusion, like building mods on top of a game. So I think you'll still have the build out. You'll still have large amounts of money going in, and capital will flow from the industrial information age to this intelligence age. People just look for places to allocate. And hopefully they'll allocate to us as well.
Let's try to do that for the audience, because that's probably the most confusing, which is the timeline. And you have very clear. So 2025, what's going to happen? Like we starting to see the first agents like Deep Research, like Operator, like Codex. We starting to see the first agents that do like one thing, they do it well. They are slow. They are normally like slower than humans at the task, but they can do it asynchronous. They can, Deep Research is maybe faster than a human, but
they're faster than humans.
Operator is, if I want to book a hotel, it's easier for me to do it from my phone and booking than actually sending Operator to do it. But in general, we will see more of these agents for the rest of the year.
I think this year we start to see agent swarms.
Already? Wow. Okay.
Well, with MCP, this interconnect protocol, an agent can spin up other agents to go and do arbitrarily long, complex things with now the ability to call and talk to your agent. And literally, you'll be able to Zoom call it and see an entity by next year.
By next year.
And
So
that's the manager of your agent swarm. And then you can see how they're doing.
then you're basically delegating tasks to this manager, and then he takes care of it.
And he'll send you a daily report on how the tasks are doing. He'll
And
tell
the
you
bill.
anything he needs. You know, again, you'll have a back and forth conversation just naturally with them. That's a next year thing.
Okay.
And then the agent capabilities by the end of next year should head up towards 92%, that human level.
So by
Across
the
the
end
board.
of 2026, we will have agents capable of doing what I can do,
Pretty much, yeah.
like edit my video or like preparing my podcast or
Any KVM
Like-
task. Like you might need to show it. Just like, you know, sometimes you onboard people and you share your screen and you show them what you're doing.
Mhm.
You might need to do that. But again, the process of talking to an agent would be like the process of hiring a talented graduate on the other side of a computer screen.
So any remote worker basically could be an agent by end of next year.
Yeah, and you just don't know what the difference is.
You will not be able to tell it.
And then they'll be able to hire other workers.
Okay. Yeah, I saw this platform where they basically, it's kind of a Fiverr for AIs to hire humans to do certain tasks.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, the AI can use Fiverr.
Yeah.
Like, why not?
Yeah, operator can do that already.
AI can hire other AIs or it can hire Fiverr. And so again, the way of interacting, this is a this year problem. Just like the capabilities have just reached good enough. Like I tell people just to relax on video and trying to make movies because it wasn't quite good enough until just now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now definitely you have like Hollywood level movies in a couple of years.
Right.
They're entirely generated by AI. Like not necessarily you type a prompt and you get a big movie, but just the whole process intermediated by AI.
If we're in a society where basically AI is doing everything in the sense of producing everything, like producing reports, producing like interviews, producing like movies, producing etc., then maybe they are right from OpenAI saying that the only thing that is left is distribution. Because what are you going to do beside doing it for yourself, which I understand that could be one of the things, like you can create your own SaaS, you can create your own app. But for a company to be able to sell something, the only thing they can do is reach the market. And
Yeah,
then,
attention is everything when the cost of creation goes to nothing.
exactly.
So this is why you need to build your followings. You need to engage with your community. Like Taylor Swift music, I'm sorry, isn't very good, you know, but she's built a following, right? And so again, that attention economy becomes even more important. Attention becomes even more valuable. And the real human interconnection that you have with other people becomes even more valuable as well. Like the job of any CEO is basically sales. You know, maybe the most popular AI job will be scapegoat when you need to blame a human.
Someone to blame, no? Yeah, I have this theory that we will have a hard time giving agency to the AI to the point where it can sign a report, it can sign a medical recommendation.
Yeah, so like on medical, I think within 3 to 5 years at most, it will be medical malpractice not to have every medical decision checked by an AI.
Yeah, I think that should be done already. Like it's
Basically,
showing already. Like
with our medical model, you can do that from a laptop. You know,
with local.
So we'll have an app next year that will be the misdiagnosis checker.
Is it multimodal already? Can I upload a PDF or
No,
like
the new version, next version will be multiple.
next version will be multimodal?
Yeah, it's, again, once you know how to do it, you can do it. And once it's done, it's like it just sits there and it will save lives.
Wow.
You know? But then eventually it'll make the decisions. But before it makes the decisions, it checks the decisions. Everyone listening to this, if you're running a business or a project, you go to ChatGPT and you switch it to O3 mode, or you use AI Studio, AI.studio from Google. If you, before you make any major decision, input it into Gemini or O3, not GPT-4o, and actually just see what it says, you'll make better decisions. Like I just have no doubt. So why shouldn't you have every single one of your major decisions checked by an AI?
Yeah, I do it all the time. I use it as a brainstorm thing. Like anytime I want to do something, a new product in my business or whatever, it just goes through my sessions with,
Exactly.
with O3.
You upload all the details and all the files and you say, look, does this make sense? Can you do a sense check for me? And so you should check every major decision you make with an AI, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, right?
It's nuts.
And like I said, you will definitely do better.
And it's even worse because I think the interface, I have the theory that keyboards are going to disappear very soon and everything is going to be kind of voice related.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like when you talk to AI, it changes everything. Like it's not anymore a screen like writing text like a chatbot. It's something there. I tried this Sesame AI, and I gone home that day when it was released, and I told my wife, like, look, you have to try this. And we spent 45 minutes talking to the thing, to the point that we look at each other being like, shit, we're speaking to fucking computer. Like, what the heck, no? And then you realize, like, oh, that's gonna be so every day for everyone, like to just have your like wearable thing where you have your AI necklace or like earpiece or glasses or whatever
it will help you more than anything, so you will trust it more than anything. Exactly. And you outsource quarters. I mean, Sesame is a great company. The first researcher that left when I said I was kind of going went there, and I recommended it because Brandon's a great guy. But these voice conversational interface, again, voice is so impactful. And OpenAI's voice mode isn't as good as Sesame's. Yeah. But it's going to be very soon. And so you said the way that you do it changes, like using WhisperFlow on your Mac. It's just a very different experience to typing. You can talk at 200 words per minute.
Yeah, there's this whole change of paradigm of doing things with the computer to asking your computer to do things. It's just like,
well, this is why
everything.
So the way we will interact with agents is exactly the way that we interact with our remote teammates. And Zoom calls, you know. But then this opens up brand new things. Like, think about the person that's impacted you most in your life. With 20 seconds of their voice and a bit of download, you'll create a digital twin of that person who can advise you through your life. How crazy is that? And you think about the psychological impact of that.
Yeah, exactly.
It can be massive. Like, the biggest issues we have are ourselves. The mental health implications of using AI in the right way are fantastic. Of using it in the wrong way are terrifying. And we have to remember that Meta and Google are ultimately advertising companies based on manipulation. So we have to think, if we have AI whispering in our ears all the time, who's that AI working for?
Yeah.
What's its objective function?
Yeah, that's the hope I have, is that since we're paying for these AIs and they are not like free like social media, I have the hope that they are going to be really helpful to us. But as you said, obviously there will be like lots of incentive to use them against us or using us because they're going to make more money than with subscriptions, actually, no? And that's where things are going to get crazy.
Well, it gets addictive. Like a couple of years ago, there was a company called Replica. And then on February 13th, so it was a mental health startup that suddenly realized that you could charge something $300 a year for not safe for work texting. And on February 13th, they got a message from Apple saying they're shutting them off. So on February 14th, a couple of years ago, Valentine's Day, they shut off the not safe for work texting. And then literally like 60,000 people joined the Reddit and said, why did you lobotomize my girlfriend?
Crazy.
And that was back then. Like, you think now, I got a new child and I got my existing kids. My kids' best friends will 100% be AIs. In fact, their first love will probably be an AI. Right? And you're like, just like you can have your podcast to everyone, like the latest stars can be chatting to your kid. Oh, it's creepy, right? But again, it's inevitable. Once you've had that voice chat with an AI and you're like, yeah, I get it,
It's crazy because it's going to change so much society and it's hard to imagine in such a short term, because you said like 2025 swarms of agents, 2026 agents get to the point where we zoomed with them and they are like able to do any job that we would do with a remote worker. Yeah. What's 2027?
Well, this is why you see Demis and Sam Altman and all these other people. We're all like AGI by 2030, basically. And again, the way that it's everywhere, everything everywhere all at once, we've never seen something like this before, whereby it should cost more. We don't know where the lower bound is. Like, again, our medical model, I knew we could build it. Just like I knew we could build Stable Diffusion, but it doesn't make sense that it's basically free for everyone in the world to have a quality doctor, to be able to generate any image, for you to have a conversation with someone that's more empathetic and understanding than anyone you can imagine on your smartphone, which wasn't designed for that. It's just like this strange new technology, right? Like when we ran it on a 10-year-old PC, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And I actually ran it on a 15-year-old PC. And I was like, shit. Because again, you don't need to run at 100 tokens per second. Just the fact that you have intelligence suddenly on these things, you're like, it's crazy. And we don't know what the lower bound is. I wouldn't be surprised if we made it 10 times smaller, 10 times faster.
In the next
few years. The current cost drops by 10 to 100 times a year of this technology. The speed increases by 10 to 100 times a year.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. If you get something that is good enough, then from there it's only making it faster and cheaper. And then there is a point where is the lower bound?
Well, this is the thing.
Basically free. It's
The human brain uses 20 watts of electricity, and you can run our medical model on 5 watts of electricity, which is
cheaper than humans in the whole sense.
Yeah, and 5 watts of electricity, let's say it's 20 watts. A solar panel offline is $1 per watt. $20 of solar panel gets you a doctor. Offline. Again,
and that's with current solar panels, because one of the things that when you improve AI, everything improves at once. So basically solar panels are going to be able to produce more energy for less money.
Well, solar panels already collapsed. Once you connect them to a grid, it becomes expensive. But just like, I can't get my head around the fact that knowledge used to take hundreds of thousands of dollars in the best medical schools is suddenly available to everyone for nothing. The ability to create a gopher fighting a chimpanzee on top of the Eiffel Tower or whatever, it was impossible. Now it's available to everyone, right? Like, we're in a time of magic. And again, we have very negative outcomes and very positive outcomes because it's a unique time in history. And so that's why I think we just need to enable people with the right tools and the right mentality to do the positive versus the negative. One of the biggest impacts, like I said, if we can build a aligned universal AI agent for everyone, we can help us manage ourselves, which is the biggest issue, to be honest. And again, that's part of what is meaning. Have the AI help you figure out what meaning is. Be your buffer. Find out when you're stressed and help you calm down. Put you in fact, what I've been realizing more and more is that the optimal thing is to keep people in a state of flow the most. So flow is that creative state that you're in where the whole world goes and you're building stuff and being creative. And that's why when vibe coding, I'm just like, everyone should vibe code for a week, 1 hour a week, because you're more likely to get in a state of flow and you finally feel that you're creating versus consuming.
I have a technical question, and I don't think anyone could be better than you to answer, because at the end you started creating models for image, which mostly are diffusion models.
Yeah.
What about these diffusion LLMs? Like in Google I/O, in the last event, they presented for the first time in a public way, making noise, a diffusion model. Basically, instead of an LLM based on tokens that generates each token, it just kind of diffuses the answer.
Yeah.
Is that the future of AI?
I think it will be hybrid architectures. So for those listening, classical transformers like ChatGPT and things like that, you're guessing the next word. So you put all this data, trillions of words, into a big supercomputer pot, and then you squish it down. And the output file is like a sieve that you push words through, and then it guesses each next word. With diffusion technology like Stable Diffusion, you take an image and you use a physics process to destroy it down to its minimum viable parts, and then reconstruct it and figure out that process. And it learns that generalized process. Diffusion is also what's used in Tesla Autopilot, for example. With a diffusion LLM, what you do is you chunk different paragraphs and it destroys it and then reconstructs it. And these models tend to be much faster and actually have better planning as well. So it's not the first one. We've seen LADA and other ones from other labs. But the speed is something crazy, because you can say, build a game of Snake, and within a second it's built.
Yeah, it's like 50 times faster than the fastest token model.
Yeah, even now the token models can get pretty fast, but you have different types of architecture even beyond that. They all tend to actually perform about the same. But they have different benefits. So some of them, for example, you put 1 trillion words in. It's a linear increase in compute versus an exponential increase in compute. Some are better at planning, some are better at other things. I think in the future, it will be a combination of different model types that allow you to do the different parts of the brain. I think diffusion LLMs are a very interesting one. I'm not sure if they're the ultimate goal, but then it may be that, again, these genius models are models that know about the whole world and stem from video and audio and other things like that, which lend itself to diffusion. Because then it understands physics, understands other things. So I think it's still jury TBD, especially because transformers, the current paradigm, people have just optimized the crap out of them. So diffusion models there's a different optimization route. Right. So we'll see, but it looks promising right now.
Looks promising.
Yeah.
Because this is like how long do you think it's going to take for this? Like, how long does it need? It's the same like as we had with Transformers, where basically as soon as money was poured in, things went faster. Or this, I was surprised that Google brings it up. You know, I know there was like Sakana, I think, had one and stuff, that they had different of these and that people been experimenting. But why would Google bring it up in I.O. if it was not because they think there's going to be...
Oh, because it looks freaking cool.
You
type a word and you have an instant app. I mean, how cool is that, right?
That's quite an answer. Yeah.
Like, Google has amazing research, and they're the ones that came up with Transformers originally and other things. And again, they're trying to reestablish relevance. Diffusions are interesting, but then again, things like their Gemma 3N model, which basically can scale its internal size for edge stuff. There's so much interesting research they do. We don't know what's going to win, but it might not be the best technology. And the example I give of that is Betamax versus VHS. Betamax was better technology, but tapes could only be an hour long. VHS was less quality, but tapes could be whatever, and it was an open standard. It won. So that's why I think the dominant AI paradigm for most of the cook jobs will be the best open source system, which is what we're building
available
right now. Yeah. Because it's permissionless, you can just take it, you can use it. You don't need to worry about it ratting you out to the police or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that would be the default one for our cook stuff. What the genius AI is, that's polymathic and can figure the mysteries of the universe, I have no idea what that will be. And again, I think there'll be trillions of dollars put into figuring that out. This AGI narrative. But like I said, right now I'm just worried about what's going to teach my kids, what's going to help run our governments, things like that.
This timeline that you set up, it's amazing. It's like incredible. And obviously, even for me that I'm quite like into AI, it's hard to believe that in the next 3 years, things are going to change that much. But in what point in that narrative, the problems may emerge in the sense of like unemployment, in the sense of like crisis situations in countries? Where do you think it's going to be like as soon as we have these agents, then people will start firing people? Like, you know, Dario made this article recently with Axios, said 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs are going to be wiped out in the next 5 years. Is that
it's like a sandpile collapse. Like a couple of years ago, I got a lot of stick for saying there are no more programmers in 5 years. Because obviously AI can talk to computers better than humans can, you know? And right now, what is it? The latest OpenAI model scores in the top 100 of all competitive programmers in the world.
Yeah, that's insane.
Come on. And people are like, oh, you know, the AI won't be able to architect the code base. Of course it will, you know? It's a sandpile collapse because it gets better everywhere all at once. Like, it's not like, you know, you're running a version of software in various places and then you have to upgrade it. So some places still run like Windows 10. When you replace the model, it makes all the model systems smarter.
All at once.
All at once. And once you make it easily accessible and the models can go and get other models, everything else is abstracted away. So that's why it can be far, far quicker, and certain industries will be quicker than others. But that's why you have protectionism in some industries, so it'll be sticky. You have less competition in others, so people won't bother firing people because you kind of like your teams, you know? And you have the hyper-capitalist ones and the outsourced ones, which are the first to go. Again, call center workers done.
It's happening already in like Duolingo and stuff like that. They got rid 10% of the externals.
And you know, like Elon Musk made it cool to cut tech workers. Most tech workers don't do anything, honestly. Like, it doesn't really matter. How many people do you need to run these companies? How many coders do you actually need? In fact, if you look at the Mythical Man Month and other things, more people make companies less effective often because you divorce responsibility, accountability, and agency. And people kind of know that. So the middle management is at risk. The entry level is at risk. The best people become multiple times better and less stressed. We just don't know how it's going to emerge, just that it will emerge. And I think this becomes the biggest thing in society next year.
Next year.
The biggest discussion.
Yeah.
The economic impact year after really is just clear for everyone to see, and we're trying to figure out solutions.
I hope we figure them out, because definitely it's going to be one of the big topics of humanity.
Yeah.
Emad, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast and to get to see your view, which definitely is very different to other things that we heard until now, and it makes a lot of sense.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Interesting times.